good evening to everybody. For those who are in the building, and then for those who will, yeah, go ahead. For those who will be online as we're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Um, we wanted to put together a town hall, community conversation, panel discussion, things of that nature, really to zone in on the housing and eviction issue, more so that took place with the CMHA, CGI technology issue. However, before we get into that conversation, and I ask the two gentlemen to my right to introduce themselves, I do want to make a plug, number one, for the South Linden Area Commission. For those who are here and online, I know we had an opportunity to talk when you first got here. The South Linden Area Commission, which meets on the third Tuesday of every month at the Point of Pride, maybe 2 minutes from here at the Clarence Lumpkin building. Those meetings that take place once a month are really the place to be for everything concerning the South Linden area community. As far as housing is concerned, public safety is concerned, transportation is concerned, education is concerned. And it's good not to just show up when something happens and let me run to the meeting to get information. It's good to just be there so you're fully aware and abreast. I want to pause because our chair of the commission is here. Do you have anything for us, ma'am? All right, wonderful. Well, we'll pause if you two can introduce yourself, and then we'll get rolling.
Sure thing. My name is Patrick Maloney. I am a attorney in the housing team at Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio, which is the long way of saying Legal Aid here in Columbus. I've been here for a little over 2 years. I've been doing housing work for a little over 7. And I am very involved with subsidized housing issues, specifically with CMHA and CGI. So I'm happy to come here today to give as much information as I can on how to navigate some of those issues people might be having. I do want to put just a little bit of a disclaimer out front. I am an attorney. I'm not your attorney, so I'm not going to be giving legal advice to anyone here. What I can do is give you some general information on specifics and even the admin questions of, well, I want to do this with CMHA, or what form do I need to submit, or I might need help protecting this right. Do I have a right to protect, and is there a way I can go about doing it? I'm happy to answer those questions and provide as much information as I possibly can. As an attorney, I handle the legal side of things, so a lot of times I have good answers, and a lot of times I have answers that aren't so good for people. And in any event, no matter who we're working with, Chris here is going to have to introduce himself. I handle the legal, and he handles the personal as best as possible, and also helps navigate, who is one of our more powerful resources we have at Legal Aid. So Chris, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Chris Kelly. I'm the social worker with Columbus Legal Aid. I've been here about 6 years at least. I support the housing team mainly, so I'm looking for funding and housing for people is my main job. Branches out into public benefits and all the other nuances of how do you sustain a livelihood here in Central Ohio. Happy to answer any questions related to that, and I think I'll have some probably resources that I share after this.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we were having a conversation before we started, and we'll go back to hit some of those things. But we were really talking about the issue kind of from a macro level, just so everyone's talking the same language. CGI being the company that CMHA used as a third party to kind of navigate those vouchers. Some type of tech issue that took place, no one really knows, but some issue that took place that made it seem as though payments were paid that were not paid, or things of that nature.
Yeah, so I can give a brief rundown of the history that led to the concern with the tech issue and the payment, and then explain where most of those issues happened, and then kind of tell you where we are. So a couple years back, Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, CMHA, contracted out their administration of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So you might hear voucher, you might hear Section 8. If you've got a benefit, it's a voucher that goes with you, and you can take it to a landlord, and it's not a subsidized building, you're most likely in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You can call that a voucher, you can call it Section 8. We all know what you're talking about in this sphere. After a couple years, CMHA decided to no longer have that relationship at the beginning of this year. So CMHA and CGI, it's a company called CGI Federal, they decided to part ways, which means that CMHA brought all those functions back in-house as they had previously existed. Now, the program's not operated exactly the same, but the point being they no longer contract most of those services out to this third party, and it's now administered within CMHA itself. They had hoped to have a smooth transition, and we all know how that went. They had hoped to pretty much be up online in March and April, but unfortunately there were issues that happened which caused a month or so in delay and a lot of processing in the computer errors that we saw in the news that were reported about. For the most part, people impacted by that were people that were looking to get new housing. So they were in the process of, they had a voucher in hand, and sometime within the last 6 or 7 months, they had been trying to take that voucher and get it placed at a new landlord. And that's where most of the problems occurred, in that while these systems were down, they were not able to get new vouchers placed, which means that payments were not being made because they were not being done. So people had moved into places expecting these vouchers to be processed timely, and they weren't. And that process did cause issues. We all know it did. CMHA, to their credit, did work pretty hard to get that resolved, but just because you worked hard to get it resolved doesn't mean that there wasn't a problem, right? As far as I know, that most of those issues, nearly all of them that were related to that specific thing, have been resolved. That system has been updated. Those people that had been waiting are in the system. Assuming they were able to stay in their home, which as far as we know, many people were. That's not to say everyone was. Back payments were made, and they've been caught up in living there. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone because I don't know about everyone. I can only speak on what I know. And what I know is that we are now at the point where that issue has been functionally resolved, except for there may be a few edge cases here or there, but I can't speak to that to 100% certainty. There are thousands of people in that program.
Awesome. Can you talk to, I guess, one, what resolution looked like from the CMHA perspective? And I know you're not with CMHA.
Yeah.
But that, and then also, we talked about earlier, so if I'm one of the ones, who unfortunately was unhoused because of this issue, right? And I've been living in my car, or I've been couch surfing and things of that nature, and I'm trying to figure out what my legal route, if any, is, or what I'm supposed to do from this moment. What do we tell them?
Yeah, so that's a big question with a couple of different answers. So what was the resolution? Generally speaking, CMHA worked really hard to get people in-house to have a lot of landlord and tenant communication staff, and they were pretty good. And again, we're framing this in there is a problem, and working to work with the landlords to say we are getting these processed. We're doing it in the order in which they were first received. In some cases, that was all the way back in November of 2024, some that I'm aware of. And then they went from first received through the end. And once they had all their new house and staff, they were working quite hard to just process those as much as possible. A lot of what happened is that people were facing displacement. Their landlords were working with CMHA, who was keeping them updated on when those would come. Now, there may have been an eviction filing that had happened, and in a lot of cases there were. But that filing did not necessarily come to a resolution or was delayed because CMHA, since that time, has paid out thousands upon thousands of dollars to back pay rent to the time in which that application should have originally been processed, which also, for the most part, solved a lot of the problems. The number one issue in pretty much every eviction is, for a landlord, do I have my money? And unfortunately, for the years with CGI and then the final transition, landlords have had to have been quite patient where they probably otherwise wouldn't have been. But in this situation, for many of the situations we know, and this is not a universal resolution, is that CMHA back paid a significant amount of rent for what should have been being paid for months on end. The next question was, well, what if I was unhoused because of this?
Right.
This is also a multifaceted question, which is going to be dependent on an individual's personal situation. What legal rights or remedies you might have are going to be highly fact-specific, so I can't just come in here and say, you have this right. I will say, generally speaking, if you were forced to move, you might not have any recourse at all. If you lost a voucher because of an administrative error, you may have some recourse and to try to get the voucher back. Now, I will say that the longer that issue has gone on, it becomes ever increasingly at a very fast pace, less likely that that issue can get resolved. So we'll have individuals come to us and say, hey, I just found out I lost my voucher 9 months ago. Now, in some situations, we can help you try to find an error, administrative thing that should have happened that didn't, and might be able to help you get your voucher back. But in the vast majority of cases, that's just too long for us to be able to help you. The best thing you can do in any situation you have is, as soon as possible, contact CMHA to try to get an informal hearing, which is one of the rights you have. Unfortunately, you have that right within 10 days of your voucher being terminated. Or you can try to call us at Legal Aid. You can go online to LASCO, stands for lasco.org. If you Google Legal Aid in Columbus, it's one of those ones that comes up there too. You can apply online. We do have intake priorities, which means we can't accept every case because frankly, we just don't have the attorneys needed to handle accepting every case and talking to everyone. So I can't guarantee that you'll get through to be able to talk to someone, but that's the best thing you can do, is go and try to apply for assistance as soon as possible if you know that you've had a problem with your voucher. So again, those questions are different. I just want to reiterate.
Right.
There's a question of, what if I was displaced from the apartment that I was renting from the landlord?
Right.
The answer to that is probably not much. What are my rights with CMHA because of the voucher that should have been paying? There you might have some rights and remedies, but the sooner you get to us, the better. Because the longer it goes from where you might have lost your voucher, it becomes exponentially more difficult to try to solve that problem.
Okay. Now, let me ask this question, and I'll say this for those in the room, for those who are online. There are about 5 or 6 people on Facebook. I'm not sure how many people are on YouTube. But if you're online and you have questions, feel free to throw that in the chat so we can get them. And if you're in the room, feel free to raise your questions. There was a question that was raised online, and they said, so what about those who get utilities assistance within the housing program? Will that be resolved? What does resolution look like for that? Because that was affected as well. So let's say I wasn't displaced or unhoused, but the housing program was helping with my utilities, and I've had to take care of that however I could figure it out, and now I'm out of that money and I needed those resources or I wouldn't have been on it. What's my options now?
Okay, so there's a question there's an answer to that impacts probably 60% of people, and so I'm just going to give that answer because that's really the best starting point for everyone else to go try to figure it out. If you think you should have been getting a utility check and you haven't been, go down to CMHA's Tenant Resource Center and ask about it. And the reason I say that is a lot of people's utility checks, both before the transition and after on the new software, are being deposited onto prepaid cards, and CMHA thinks you have these cards. A lot of people don't have those cards. So that money still might be there, you just need to get the card to get it. So go down to CMHA's Tenant Resource Center and ask where that utility check is being paid. Because if it's being paid on one of those cards and you go, well, I've never had a card, they may be able to help you get that, and then there's that money.
All right, awesome. Yes, sir.
I hear Metropolitan is taking a lot of responsibilities that CGI was supposed to handle. My significant other is an accountant, bookkeeping, and we have 4 businesses. What is so difficult for me to understand is, how did we get to this point? And who's being charged criminally for the negligence of CGI's misappropriation of state funds?
Yeah. So I can't answer most of that question. The thing I would have to refer you to that is go talk to a state or local rep about your concerns, because I work at Legal Aid and we deal with civil lawsuits and not criminal. I will say the reason we got to where we are from my perspective, from working with tenants every day that have been impacted by it, is that in my personal opinion, a couple years ago, CMHA made a real bad choice to subcontract all their program out to CGI. I think they've absolutely realized that mistake and then moved on from it. And unfortunately, the moving on from it caused another problem. In my personal experience, I think CMHA has taken a lot of steps to fix that. But again, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a problem to be fixed. As far as investigations or anything like that, I am not in a position to comment on it. And frankly, I don't know. So that would be something I would recommend you talk to a state or local rep about to voice your concerns.
Are you able to speak to, we talked about it a while ago, because this is a government entity, and I'm not exactly sure how the answer was given earlier, legally, what route people in general are really even able to take or not take because this is a government entity?
So there's a long answer to that question. I'll try to be as brief as possible. CMHA, as it's what's called a Metropolitan Housing Authority or a public housing authority. There's multiple of them throughout the state, and then every state has multiple throughout the country. In the state of Ohio, these are what's called sort of quasi-governmental entities. So they're sort of established by statute, even though they're for the most part, functionally privately run, but they are quasi-governmental, right? Privately run is probably not the right word, but we're just going to use that for now because it's not like they're being elected by state or local governments, right? The rights you have for recourse are limited by what's allowed under the state and federal laws. If you have a problem that's become from the way they administer their program, you have relatively limited rights. There is a 10-day right to an informal hearing if you have problems with the way the program is being administered as it relates to you individually. That 10-day right to an informal hearing, when I say 10-day right, it means you have 10 days to request what's called an informal hearing. And then that informal hearing will be set at some point in the future. If you don't request that informal hearing within 10 days, you may be out of your rights already because you missed your deadline. And the way that notice goes out, it goes out on a notice that might be mailed or emailed to you, and you might not get it until you've got 2 or 3 days left to request the hearing. So if you have a situation in your family that means you can't get down and request it in time, you might be out of luck. If you've got a medical situation and you can document you're at the hospital, or there's some other circumstance, you can go down and try to request it later, request another chance. CMHA, depending on the situation, may or may not have the obligation to give that to you. In most chances, they probably don't have the obligation. But I will say that as a general rule, where they can in the situation allocates, they will review and see if that's an opportunity that should occur. This is not going to be this is definitely going to happen in your situation piece of advice. So my advice is when you get that 10-day notice of your rights to request a hearing, you should make that your #1 priority. And then at which point a hearing can be scheduled in your matter, so long as you have the right to that hearing, which again you don't always do, and only certain situations you do, usually involving termination of your voucher is the big one. Sometimes when it comes to certain types of rent adjustments, you might also have that right. The informal hearing will be set. It's usually conducted online now. They don't do them so much in person anymore. So make sure you have an updated email address on your account with CMHA, because that's where they'll send your hearing right notice. And then that hearing is conducted with a third-party officer who will hear your side of the story, hear CMHA's side of the story, and then afterwards they have a couple weeks to issue a hearing decision. If it comes to that, sometimes it can be resolved, as anything can, through negotiation in the meantime. If you disagree with that hearing decision, there is technically a right under state law to go to common pleas court and try to challenge it. It's very difficult to do on your own. So I would suggest, again, if you can, try to get a hold of legal aid, wherever that might be locally, or at least try to consult with an attorney, because at that point you are in the midst of a legal process. Those are your administrative rights. Your rights of, well, I have this claim, so I want to sue them. For the most part, public housing authorities are immune from prosecution. There are exceptions to this. I'm not going to go through them all now. But a question that we get all the time is, well, I want to sue them for X, Y, Z because you you suffered hardship A, B, C. You suffered those hardships, and that was not fair, right? But that doesn't mean you have a right to sue this entity. Because in certain situations, the government has to give you the right to sue them. And in many situations, they've chosen not to give you the right to sue public housing authorities, except in limited enumerated circumstances. Outside of that, there may be what's called like federal due process claims. These are more civil rights claims that apply to government agencies, largely federal agencies, federal claim. But you may talk to a civil rights attorney about that, but that's hard to do. There's only so many of them. So I don't have great answers for you, but those are the answers. That's what your rights are in those situations.
I need to apologize for being late, but what is your name and what is your title?
Sure. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm a housing attorney with Legal Aid in Columbus. I've been doing subsidized housing for about 7 years.
Okay, and this other gentleman here?
And I'm Chris Kelly. I'm the social worker for Columbus Legal Aid. I support the housing attorneys in their work. And to your question, that's a terrific question. And that's the most frustrating thing that I hear from people and for myself too. What are the consequences for them? And the answer is not usually good. And the people that I work with, the angle is usually your best victory is to take care of yourself and your family and your people and get right as best you can to recover from this, and then take that passion and do something constructive with it.
So you're the attorney that represents Metropolitan?
No. I work for Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio. Our main office is on City Park Avenue in Columbus. We represent tenants in eviction court and also outside of eviction court in circumstances relating to if they're having issues, particularly with CMHA, about their subsidy, their voucher, or issues they might otherwise be having in subsidized housing programs.
So
We work with tenants.
You wouldn't have any idea whether or not CGI has came under scrutiny or fired for the mismanagement of that whole program as a whole with these tenants? Because I hear what you're saying and I understand your position, but my thing is dealing with the residents that are being displaced. To me, it sounds like gloom and doom from your standpoint.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have a certain period of time in order to appeal or else apply for a hearing. And if you don't receive those notices or whatever, you only have 10 days.
Yeah.
And then you're out.
So there's two questions in there that I heard that I'm going to answer separately.
Okay.
The first is a question on sort of the way this is strictly operated, right? And there's this 10-day right, and how do you manage this program? So CMHA has its own admin plan to the extent that they are allowed to develop their own policies and procedures. But most of what they do is governed by federal law. So for the most part, the way they operate the program is the way the law requires them to operate the program. Now, it's a different question from your question about CGI and coming under fire. I don't know about that, and I can't speak on it because that's more of a political thing than it is something that we would handle at Legal Aid or even criminal. I don't know if a state or local person would look at it. That's outside my wheelhouse. I don't deal with that sort of thing. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't have a better answer for you. There was one more question in there that I wanted to answer, but I didn't have it. 10-day meeting, consequences, what are your rights as they're operating? I had another one that escapes me. I'm sorry. If I remember it, I'll come back to it.
From my standpoint, because I've dealt with Metropolitan Section 8
Uh-huh.
for years. I'm a veteran.
Uh-huh.
And I've dealt with their programs. I've never had any issue because from my standpoint, I don't trust nobody, especially governmental programs and people that operate governmental programs, because they get really laxed to a point where they don't care about situation has done nothing but compounded this problem, irregardless of them on the news building more housing. It takes years for those houses to be developed and come into play. And the process that they go about offering these houses or these properties to people is in a lottery system, which a lot of people don't understand. When they apply for a home under the auspice of home ownership, you're in competition with 10, 15, 20 other people.
Yep.
The deception is you take this class, and after you take this class, your voucher is on the hook. You got 90 days to find a home. You don't find a home within 90 days, you're homeless. Or else, if you make arrangements because you don't fit the guidelines as far as credit is concerned and down payments are concerned, you could lose everything. It's a lot of deception that's going on in the programs as a whole. And I don't think CGI was really aware of the things that they were dealing with, or maybe they were.
You won't find a defender of CGI sitting up here.
I'm sure I just was checking, making sure.
Yeah, no.
Because my thing is this right here. An institution like that was overseeing thousands of people and their livelihood, somebody should be going to jail. Somebody should be investigated from the top to the bottom. Who was doing your technical assistance? In your accounting, in your bookkeeping? There's a lot of things I question because my significant other does these things. And I see how she's on it on a daily basis. And you have to give reports. That's what I do know. You have to give reports to these other entities on what's going on. So it's just amazing to me how the ball was dropped. It wasn't dropped. It was fumbled.
No.
You know, and everybody was scrambling for it. And couldn't nobody get a hold to it. And this is where we are today with people being displaced. I think it's a travesty. And I understand your role.
Yeah.
You have a big role. You're like David and Goliath, but I don't even know if you're going to win this one right here. I don't think you will. I'm glad to see you here,
Yeah.
but as far as the information that you have, it's like gloom and doom information for some people. It really is.
Yeah, listen, I fully hear you. I fully understand where you're coming from. As someone who dealt with CGI every day for 2 years when I came to Columbus, I wasn't here for their first year or so. Sometimes I felt like beating my head against the wall. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh yeah, that was a great decision. And then Chris here has speaking of David and Goliath, this guy is the guy who has the heroic task of, I can get you to the legal information. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But that's why we really love having Chris as a resource, because we're saying, how do you get into these resources? How do you get into these programs? How do you get down payment assistance? How do you get security deposit? What if I need my first and last month's rent? We are very fortunate at Legal Aid to have someone like Chris on staff who is, I'll go out and say it, I'm going to guess top 5 knowledgeable people in the city is about what people can do in a bad situation. And the unfortunate thing is here we're talking about housing, and we're talking about housing in a way that is talking about people who need rental assistance, people who need that support to keep their families housed. And the reason that we're here is we're talking about because we're here where that situation has failed. So it is almost inherently doom and gloom. And it's how do we navigate that to try to find the bright outcome that does exist. Sometimes that outcome's brighter for some than it is for others. And what we do in our jobs is try to navigate that as best as possible for each of our individual clients. Because I'm not going to come in here and pretend like I'm saying the sweetest things in the world to you. You're right. It's tough. What I am doing is going to try to empower as many people here who may watch it online as possible with at least information that they might not otherwise have, because some of this is kind of specialized stuff. You don't know until you get into a problem, and then you try to go talk to someone or figure it out what the process is, because these are bureaucratic processes. It's been written into law that you have to follow steps 1 through 20 to get this, and oh, by the way, if you missed a step, you might be in trouble. You're not going to find any question from me there. And Chris, I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about navigating that the way that, if you do find yourself in a situation where, let's say I've given someone some bad news about maybe not getting a voucher back or something like that, what kind of resources to look for in the city that could help you get at least try to get stable or maybe look for that next place.
Yeah, sure. So, and the point that you brought up about, so I have this voucher, now there's 10 hurdles that I need to pass just to get somebody to accept it and to get all the pieces to fall into place. That's very, very accurate. And obviously you've had experience with that. My position with legal aid a lot of times is what Patrick described. We've got someone who's had a rapid change in their life circumstances and they are looking for housing and they need housing now. And sometimes we can find it and help them navigate those obstacles, and sometimes we can't, and we're planning for A, B, and C different options, which may involve other people, it may involve the shelter system, it may involve a lot of creative planning. But part of my job at Legal Aid is to keep track of how people are getting accepted, what places are taking folks with that type of experiences and background and qualifying criteria. I try to keep up as best I can. I try to keep up on what housing is being built, as you said, extremely, extremely slowly and at about half the rate that we need to keep up with the people that want to move here. Not to say anything for the people that are already here. I'm happy to share resources that I know. They change rapidly, so I try to keep them updated, but places will have a rent special and the word gets out and they're full for months and months. You have to try to play whack-a-mole a little bit. The other catch, as you could expect, is the places that have immediate openings have openings for a reason usually. Sometimes for a good reason that they just renovated and the place is great and they want people to move in. But the idea being you have to try to find a place where you are wanted and they're trying to approve you instead of deny you. So you're not wasting $55 an adult plus a $100 holding fee plus a $200 quote unquote refundable, intro fee.
I got a quick question. When you talk about resources, what are some of those resources? Because oftentimes I may receive a call, I serve as a receptionist for a church, and you have people calling, needing rental assistance, or they're needing, help with their mortgage or their property taxes, or they're needing help with their utilities. What places could I send them to or refer them to?
That's a great question. So with the COVID era funding, we had a lot of federal dollars in, and most folks know that those are pretty well dried up. Impact, for example, was with us at court, at eviction court. They had a table there that a lot of people used and got great help from to get through that bump in life. They're not at court anymore. They are trying to get some money again. They're not trying to be out of the business of helping people with rent and deposits. They do still do utilities help. So you can still go to Impact for utilities help. Job and Family Services has the PRC program. It's a Prevention, Retention, Contingency PRC program. If you've got a minor in the home under your custody, nobody else is claiming them elsewhere, you actually have custody. And for now, at least, they have some sustainability requirements. They want to know that they're using their money for something that won't just get you farther, but that will keep you. And don't quote me, but the latest information we have is they'll go up to about $2,000. They'll pay rent for a couple months back. They'll pay your deposit if you're moving to a new place. They have some income caps, but generally if you're in that position, you'll probably qualify for them. If you qualify for legal aid, you'll probably qualify for them. If you're a senior, COAAA, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, does have funds. You gotta be over 60, not 55, 60, but just call them. They have a very small crew, but they do similar stuff. They can't help you find a home. They can't help you move your stuff into a home, which that's one of the hardest things to find in the city. But they will spend money helping you. Other thing, if you're a veteran, you mentioned, sir, I don't know what your experience has been with.
I'm a veteran. I was in the Army.
The
And I know
Army?
they do give assistance
do.
and their dependents.
And their dependents at times. I've had the best luck personally with the Vets Commission on East Broad, giving money. I don't know that the VA does a lot. But those are the main buckets. I get a lot of questions. I'm disabled. Is there special resources for me? The short answer is nope.
Pastor Davis, you had your hand up. You had a question, sir?
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Also, we don't bite. You can come up here if you want to, man of God.
And thank God for Travis family. I want to ask a question because I can point the finger at you and shout at you all that I want. But my question to you is, this something has been going on. I can say even as I was a kid, it's been going on. Then COVID made it worse. And then now we got an issue between the landlords and the tenants. And they're asking for you guys to help them fight each other in certain types of way. But my question to you is, what do we do next? What would you ask to do? Sir, I know we gotta go to the PRC and things like that, but outside of that, what can we do to kind of help this not continue to be something? If you understand what I mean.
I mean, so there's a couple of answers to that, none of which I think are going to be
And
perfectly
give me the real.
satisfying. Yeah, I'm going to be real with you.
Give me real.
So a lot of the supports we had that helped people get sustainable, like impact, that sort of thing, over the last couple of years, those came around from emergency rental assistance, COVID funding, that sort of thing. We are going back into now what I kind of colloquially refer to called the bad old days, where that support isn't around anymore. That is a political question that frankly we don't have the answer to up here and we can't comment on it. But that is a question of community will. What is our community government, state, local, federal, whatever it might be, willing to do? Because that is where a lot of these resources that help people get stable, whatever they might be, whether it's impact money that help with back rent, whether it's, I can free up cash I have in hand because I get SNAP for food assistance, or I get utilities assistance through JFS. That's a question that we as legal aid attorneys and a legal aid firm can't resolve. We try to help people where they're at. That's a bigger question that my best answer is. I assume you're involved in your community, Pastor. Stay involved in your community. Stay involved talking to people. Make sure that they're communicating what they think their needs are to the people that make those decisions. That's the best answer I can give you.
Because the reason why I say that, because I know personally from friends, family members, that sometimes we mishandle help. And because we mishandle help, when it's time for that need again, and the resource is not available, we have to look back at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I should did what's right last time. And some of us are not doing that. So now it hurts the ones who really need the help, or the ones that took advantage of it and wasn't wise stewards of the help that was given. Because when you gave the 6 months of rent up front, we dispersed our money versus saving. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why I'm asking this question.
Yeah. And I will just say I fully understand your point, because we've all been there before in our lives, right? Where we may not have used our resources wisely enough, both individually and as a community. The best thing I can say is you can't go back and change the past.
Right.
So do what you can now to, correct that, fix it, change it, what have you. The other thing I can say is, there are still resources here. Just because you may have misused something in the past or didn't avail yourself of what you might have been able to, or maybe you don't even know what your rights are or currently are. Like, reach out, talk to people, talk to community members. If you think it might be a legal problem, see if it's something we can assist with. You can only do so much looking back to see what the problem was, whereas you have to do a look forward to see, all right, how am I going to work on this in the future? In my position, I do a lot of looking back as an attorney to say, oh man, you really screwed up 8 months ago. Now I can't help you. But that doesn't change the fact that you are where you are today, and wherever you're gonna be 6 months from now, you're gonna be there anyways. So try to figure out a way to have your best thing go for it. I think Chris was talking earlier about, so one thing you're talking about is using resources, and we're talking about applying to an apartment complex, right? Well, now you might be in an unfortunate situation where you're unstably housed, unhoused, what have you. And it can be hard, but to get around to go and apply to these places that have long wait lists. But at the end of the day, if you're on a wait list that takes 8 months for you to get offered an apartment, well, 8 months from now is still gonna be 8 months from now. So wouldn't you rather have that option 8 months from now because you took that action today rather than not taking an action? Taking an action, something seems easy, like applying to an apartment. It's not necessarily easy for everyone. Depends on what you're doing in your life right now. But as best as you can, learn about what resources are available, talk to the people in your community, and try to take advantage of those now, so that even if it's not an immediate benefit, you're set up so that when you're in the future, because you're gonna be in the future at that time anyways, that you've set yourself up better. And that'd be my answer to that. Chris, you have anything else to build on that?
Yeah, Patrick's absolutely right. And your point is well taken about personal responsibility. That applies to all of us, like Patrick said. I can only speak from my experience, which is the vast bulk of people that I work with at eviction court are terribly embarrassed to be there. Some of them even turn down resources because they feel they're not deserving of them. Other people should have them more. There's certainly folks in any environment, but I think hopefully most of those dollars went to good things, and it's certainly in a system that is quite stacked against tenants. The apartment search, the amount of housing, the tenant laws, and things like that.
Don,
And then for the, I'm sorry.
Don, did you have something? Davis?
And then for the person who has Section 8, I know a couple people who had Section 8 and they've had a problem with when it was taken from them, trying to find a place, in a time, in a good time frame to where my 6 children are not out of the house. I don't have background of work history, so that's something, what do you guys do for that?
That's a Chris question.
That's one of the toughest situations.
Okay.
If you're having to leave a place that you had a subsidy with no subsidy, it's the worst case. You can have the conversation, all right, well, we got to get up some income. We got to put an application into a place that is probably going to take a while. The horrible conversation for me was someone where I'm saying you're going to have to lower your very reasonable, very human standards because this is what's available right now.
But then I get in trouble because they tell me I can't have as many people in the house.
That's another catch. We even have folks where we're trying to get them to rent a hotel room and they say, you need another, over 18 person here. We can't have this many kids in one room. We don't have with the Section 8 requirements can be even difficult.
Yeah, and I'll build a little bit on that because that is talking a little bit about some of these subsidized programs and the limitations they have. If you're just in a private landlord-tenant situation, generally speaking, you can find a house, move your family into it, and you may be stuffed in there, but at least you got a place. With the voucher program, generally speaking, there's sort of colloquialism we use, which is 2 souls per room, which is whatever size place that you're gonna be allowed to have, you're gonna be only allowed to have 2 people per bedroom. For the most part, that just means bedrooms, right? Sometimes in certain situations, a living room can count. So let's say, a parent with 4 kids gets 2 bedrooms, so they get their kids in the bedroom and they're sleeping on the couch every night. But that's still a place that fits within the limits. That will also apply for most subsidized housing, like complexes generally. They have those same rules, and there's no real way to get around them because those are federally mandated. That is what the law says they have to do for operations, so that is what they have to do. And it is tough, especially for families with a lot of kids. If you're trying to stay in the city, stay around your family, stay around your support networks, you've got a voucher that says, one of the more common ones we have difficulty with is, let's say it's a family with 8 kids. They range from an infant to late teenagers. It's not an uncommon family situation. Well, that means you have to have 5 bedrooms. How many houses in this city do you know have 5 bedrooms? Not many. Now limit that down to ones that are going to be cheap enough to fit in the voucher rent.
Right.
Basement's a bedroom if you put an escape window on it. If it's not, it doesn't count. But it can, so long as you got the renovation in there. But most places in the city that have 5 bedrooms, none of us are going to be able to afford them in our lifetime, right? So it is tough. People have to make that decision of, can I stay in the city? Do I have to go somewhere where maybe I have to go to a different county so that I can find a house with more bedrooms? You can do that. You can take your voucher to other counties. Usually not in the first year you have it, because you're supposed to, within the first couple of years you have the voucher, they want you to use in the community that issued them to you. So for instance, CMHA is called Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. Realistically, it should be called Franklin County Metropolitan Housing Authority. You can move somewhere in Franklin County with CMHA. But now you've got kids and you've been looking and your voucher for 90 days is going to expire. Maybe you got an extension. You got lucky enough you got it early, you got your extension, so now you get another 60 days. Well, I just looked for 90 days in Columbus and I couldn't find something. What am I going to do? Because I'm moving. Let's say I've had my voucher for a year or two. Maybe I need to go to Marion County. Now that stinks. You're from Columbus. Why are you moving to Marion County? But maybe you got to go somewhere that might have bigger houses to fit your family. That's the way the practicalities of these programs work, because that's the way the rules are written. And when you have those sort of benefits, unfortunately, you need to conform yourselves to the bureaucracy of the rules and the way they are written. And it can be tough to find those places. There's no sugarcoating it on that. People have a tough time looking for it. And it's because, especially when you got your bigger families, especially when it might be a single parent household who's just trying to take care of their kids, some of them might be sick. Well, now I've got to go look for a house in between a doctor's appointment, take my kids to school, going to the job, getting home. It's tough to do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's not. So it's use your resources, use your community. And if you're trying to find a 5-bedroom, use Zillow and pray. That's about it. That's about it, because it can be tough.
Let me say this. We got about 5 more minutes left. There's some additional people who are online. If you have questions, now is the time to throw them in there. I want to throw the Don for hers, and then anybody else in the room who has theirs in the next 5 minutes.
I've just been sitting here and trying to even formulate a question. I really want to have a better understanding of, I know we don't know how many people this has affected, but if there's someone that identifies themselves that says, this specifically happened to me, like I heard you say, 60% of these people were reapplying for their voucher, or they were looking for a new place and they were affected. Do those people have to start the process all over to get a voucher, or do they get to go to the front of the line, or how are they made, I don't want to say made whole
Sure.
again?
So there's a little bit in there that I just want to run back on and clarify again. And then possibly the best thing I can do is just explain the process and the procedures with our time, because they are a bit hard to understand. To answer your question just specifically, I'm going to say I don't know, because the resolutions you might have are very fact specific. So you can come apply to legal aid, and we'll see if it's something we can do after we hear your facts, and then if those facts seem like we might be able to help, you can talk to an attorney maybe if we have one available, and then we can go from there. We do that every day for hundreds of people a year. So I can't give a straight answer to you, because the answer is it very highly depends. When we're saying like the people that were affected by this, for the most part, when we're talking about like this computer system down thing, that was almost entirely people who were placing vouchers. If you had a voucher, that should not have affected payments going out. For some people it did, which is why there was some people that were just on their program that had payments shut down because of one thing or another. I can't speak on it because I don't know that person's situation. It is, again, hyper individualized for what happened with that person. I will say now what it is you need to do, just to give people who are here and might be listening a rundown. if you have your voucher, we said before, you have a certain amount of time to place it. You can also request extensions if you're running out of time to place it. You can ask for a first extension. They are still generally giving those out, though it is not a right you have more often cases. It's more of a permission they can give you. CMHA is no longer generally giving second extensions, which is something they used to do. So if you've been on the program and are used to having multiple extensions, don't plan on having those anymore. The federal law does not require them to give that many extensions. So at this point, the way things are restructuring, we're not there. So if you have your voucher in hand, what do? Find a landlord. We just talked about that. Not the easiest thing in the world to do. But when you do, you get what's called an RTA packet, request for tenancy approval. You get that to your landlord, you and your landlord fill it out, you turn it into CMHA. They process that. Is it gonna be the fastest thing in the world? No. It just isn't. They do it when, as first come, first serve, for the amount of staff they have and the requests they get. It comes through. Oftentimes there'll be errors on it, which means it gets kicked back, needs to get redone, you need to start the process over because the road name was wrong or the address was one off. Seems little, because it is, but it's also incredibly important. After that point, one thing that people get trouble in is they move in before their RTA is approved. Do not do that. Let me put it this way. If you do, know that you're gonna be paying rent for yourself for the amount of time that you've been in that unit, between that and whether or not your lease then gets approved. If it doesn't get
full
approved,
amount.
the full amount of rent, you will not be paying your portion because your RTA has not been approved. You have not been approved to live there yet, and people get in a pitfall because they need a place now, and I fully get that. But then their RTA may then get approved later, and then they have a portion later, but now they've got 2 months of full rent that they might get evicted for because they don't have that. Because CMHA is not gonna pay any money until they approve you to live there. After that point, CMHA and the landlord will do an inspection called an HQS, a housing quality inspection. If the RTA is approved, doesn't mean the HQS is approved. They may say everything's fine, they go and inspect it, and they say, oh, this place, we can't pay this. This housing quality is too bad. Again, if you moved in early, now you're out of luck. You don't get to move in until all those approvals are done, and then they'll tell you, okay, at this point, we're sending the HAP contract out to the landlord. The HAP contract, it's short for a Housing Assistance Payments Contract. It's the contract that's between CMHA and the landlord. You and the landlord have the lease. Lease says what the rent is. Landlord and CMHA have the HAP, which also says what the rent is, but it also says what you pay and what CMHA pays. And there's also some additional provisions and protections in that for you as a tenant that may override some otherwise harsh lease terms. So now you're living there, you're paying your portion, CMHA's paying their portion. Can't move usually within the first year, but let's say it's year 3, you decide you wanna move, what do? You submit a notice to terminate your lease, usually 30 to 60 days. You submit that, usually signed, sometimes notarized to CMHA. Sorry? You need to give it both. So let's say that you're off your lease and you want to, and it's been after the first year, because in most circumstances you can't move within the first year. But let's say you've been there for 3 years and you have the right to move because your lease is expired, something like that. You would give your notice that you want to terminate your lease. Most leases have the rules for how long you need to put that in there. We recommend at least 60 days. You need to give that to both your landlord and to CMHA. And you turn that in with what's called a moving in place packet, MIP packet. You fill out the MIP, you turn in your notice. CMHA will tell you if you didn't turn in everything correctly. If you didn't, resubmit it. And then once that's all done, that's how you get your voucher in hand. Now, once you have your voucher in hand, you gotta move, because now that means you don't have subsidy on your apartment anymore. So it's best to at least be looking before already, because after that, you've only got a couple weeks.
Because my situation is different.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that a little bit afterwards, because I don't want to do too much hyper.
That's why I was.
Yeah, and then I might just tell you to come apply legally, which I'll tell everyone here anyways. But we can talk a little bit about that afterwards. Now, what happens if my income changes during the year? Every year, if you're on the program, you know you have to do an annual recertification, which you turn in all your employment and income and all that to CMHA. If your income changes, going up or down, normally down's the one where you really care about it, but either one you should still turn it in. It's called an interim recertification, an IR. CMHA has all these packets available for you. You can go into the tenant center and do them. A lot of them are online as well. They are complex. They require you to submit a lot of documents. If you just did an AR, annual recertification, and then a month later your income went down, you have to do an IR. And you're gonna say, I just turned all this into you. Yes, you did. Well, too bad, you gotta do it again anyways. You submitted MIP because you wanna move. That has all the financial information in it, but now you lost your income changed. It went up, it went down. You submit an IR. Well, now I have to do the same thing, same paperwork. Yes, it is. It's frustrating. You need to do that paperwork. You need to do it in the order it goes in because they cannot process one thing until they finish processing the other. So if you're, a lot of people get that in a situation where they're waiting for an RTA to process, but my hours were cut at work. So I turned to my IR. That IR is not gonna be done until your RTA is done. So your rent might be higher than you want it to be because your income's down. But do that as fast as possible. Make sure you're diligent about getting that in on your sequencing because that's what matters. They process as you come in, and I can't promise they're gonna be fast about it, especially if they need you to resubmit documents or they need to check things. Again, that's gonna be sort of individually based. If you get everything in and right the first time, they may have it to you in a week or two. Sometimes if they get a lot in, they just have to go through them as they get them. But stay on top of it. The tenant center, if you go down there, will usually have those forms. They're available online. I would suggest if you haven't yet, create an online account with CMHA for your voucher. They will give you notices posted to your account. The big thing to do, especially if you're on the wait list, is make sure your email is up to date with CMHA. Make sure your mailing address is up to date. One of the worst things that happens to the people when they finally get pulled off the wait list is their approval is sent to an email they haven't used in 2 years and an address they haven't been in 3. And now you had no idea that you were approved because the contact information you had on file with CMHA was old, and then you lose your position because your addresses weren't updated. Check your email. If you have an email with CMHA, you really need to check it. They will email you notices. They will mail you notices. I would also suggest, if you can, to get mail tracking through the USPS. One of the biggest issues that people have is a dispute between, well, I never got this notice. And as an attorney, if I work with a client and that client comes to me and says, well, I never got this notice, and then I go to CMHA and I say, hey, did you send this notice? And they go, yep, here it is. Now, you have to prove you didn't get it. That's hard to do. If you got mail tracking, tracks all your mail coming in. You can do that.
And that's free, I think.
And that is free. At least for now. Yep.
Yeah, I think I was blessed because I went through a program where I bought my house
Yep.
through assistance with CMHA, based on my income
Mm-hmm.
and my disability. The process is long. Well, it's somewhat long, but you have to take these classes in order to qualify to purchase a home. It's a beautiful thing if you have things in place when they require you to have it instead of searching for it because it speeds the process up. I own my home, but I get assistance through CMHA for my mortgage payment.
Yep.
And I get a little extra also because of utilities. It's a great program, but I will tell you this right here. If you don't have the credit, don't let them, don't do it. If you get involved in these programs and you give your voucher up, it's going to be very difficult to get your voucher back. You have 90 days to complete that whole process. If you don't complete that process in 90 days, I've never experienced it, but you may lose your voucher. But it's a great program if you have everything in place.
Yeah. The homeownership program is great if you can get into it. It is tough to get into, and it does provide the benefit of you could become a homeowner. Yeah. It is a smaller program. We don't deal too much with it, so I'm not going to expound more on it. But I'm glad that you've been having the success that you've been having with the program because that's why it's there, and it's quite helpful.
Pastor Liggins, you had final thought?
How well has CMHA
There are probably still people dealing with it. It's percentage-wise, as far as I know, very small, but as compared to the number of people that were affected by it. I can't give exact dates, but for the most part, we were seeing the issues being resolved by midsummer.
I can tell you from anecdotal experience, I tell people if you have a voucher at a place and you're trying to move it somewhere else, you don't always have the option because your landlord can file an eviction, but try to build in 3 months. 3 months.
Do you have to?
From Yeah, you notify CMHA to get your voucher to when you can move in with them paying at a new place.
Appreciate everyone who came out, and for those who are online, and of course, if you have questions afterwards, if the two of you very quickly, I guess, could give information for how people in the room, people who are watching online, can get in touch with, yourself or your organization, things of that nature, and I guess just one sentence you want them to leave with, and then we'll be good to go for tonight.
Yeah, so like I said, my name is Patrick Maloney. I'm attorney with the housing team at Legal Aid of South, East, and Central Ohio, more colloquially Legal Aid here in Columbus. This is my partner, Chris Kelly, is a social worker. We are very involved in these sorts of housing situations. We are at court many days a week. We are talking to CMHA, CGI. If you are currently having problems, especially if they're new problems, please go online. The easiest way is to apply online, as well as there's phone applications online as well. It's LASCO, Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio, lasco.org, lasco.org. You can apply online there. If you don't live in Franklin County, you're watching this in the counties outside of Franklin County, we do serve counties outside of Franklin County. We have a whole map on there of where our offices are located. Please go on our website. We have so much information and resources on there. If you find yourself facing a housing crisis, please call us as soon as possible for some legal situation you might have, legal crisis specifically. We also are down at eviction court every day of the week. You can approach us at the table we have down there on the 11th floor. That's the eviction floor. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience having to be there, you know where it's at. We would very much prefer you not wait to come to court that day. Because if we can help you, and I can't guarantee we can, you will now probably be last in line. Which means that if you're trying to get an attorney, well, there's a lot of other people out there. A lot of other people there that day looking for an attorney too. Also, if you come to us beforehand, we might be able to solve it before we get there, right? Be proactive. That is my advice. When you face something, don't wait. Be proactive. Reach out for resources.
And the only other thing I would add is if you prefer face-to-face stuff, if the phone lines don't work for you, the online app doesn't work, come see us at 1108 City Park Avenue. We're on the south side there.
Corner of Thurman and City Park, just about a block south of Schiller Park.
So we're here to help.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate the two of you coming out, having a conversation with us tonight, and hopefully, prayerfully, this was beneficial to the folk who were here, for the folk who were jumping in and out of the live stream, and that information can continue to be shared. But for tonight, you have anything else? Wonderful. That's all we have. If you have questions afterwards, feel free to approach. Not that long, because we got to get home. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.